And Krista, you can start. There you go.
So tonight, our objective is just to review basic information about IEPs. We'll take a look at the next slide. So we're going to look at just IEPs tonight and not look at 504s. But when we look at IEPs, we're going to look at the IDEA and Individuals with a Disability Education Act. So it gives us federal guidance. And from there, states write a comprehensive plan on how they will follow this guidance. So we know that we have federal, like the federal level, and then states take that. And then school districts write a comprehensive plan on how they will follow the state guidance from there. So you kind of look and like how the different levels of the guidance on the laws that need to be followed in our IEPs that are written. And this defines on how students qualify, the procedures and processes, and the timelines that need to be followed, and the procedural safeguards and parent rights for IEPs.
Yep.
Is there anything you want to add to that?
No. You know, the only thing I would add is that, so I don't know if you guys are aware of, and we have a link to it, I think, coming up, but we have a book on our website, and if you send us if you stop in, you can have it, or if you send us a message, we'll mail it to you. But it's what parents should know about special education in South Dakota. And it covers all that. It tells you, this is what IDEA says, this is what states have to do. Now, this is what South Dakota does. And this is what you should know about that, parents. And it breaks out those parent rights in a really easy format to understand. And it's a nice book that you can sticky note and whatnot. So I will give a link to that coming up. And but it really is a useful tool for everybody. So.
And so when we think about special education, we think of it's specially designed instruction at no cost to parents to meet the unique needs of a child with disability. And then I'm just gonna move right to the next slide because I think it explains better. So when you think of disabilities, here are the 13 categories for qualifying for a disability for students. And examples that when you think about qualifying categories, I think about like dyslexia. Dyslexia is not on this list, but the category that would qualify under is a specific learning disability, and that would be for reading. Another one would be ADHD, and that would be under other health impairment. And that would be how an ADHD child would qualify for an IEP.
Yeah.
So sometimes, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You're probably going to say it. Go ahead.
I was just going to say sometimes parents it's confusing because they'll just say like with ADHD, this isn't, how does my child qualify and how does my child get accommodations or supports? But when you look at the categories, they fit underneath that disability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the other way that what I was going to add is, you know, parents, you may go to a doctor and you'll have a doctor say, well, my child has ADHD, or my child has dyslexia. You'll go to a private practitioner and they'll say, your child has dyslexia. And then you come to the school and you're like, well, where is it? I don't see it on here, right? And so you can get a medical diagnosis, which there are hundreds and hundreds of medical diagnoses out there. But IDEA only gives schools these categories. There's 13, and then developmental delay is really a 14th one, but we can only use that up through age 8. By age 9, kids have to be determined eligible under one of these other categories. So it can be frustrating for parents if somebody doesn't understand that there's a difference between, let's say, a medical diagnosis and then how a school has to determine eligibility. So, you can have a student with cerebral palsy. Well, that's not on here, but they may have multiple disabilities or orthopedic impairments related to their cerebral palsy or learning disabilities. You can have kids who have a diagnosis of Down syndrome, but Down syndrome isn't on here, but we know a lot of kids with Down syndrome have cognitive disabilities or other health impairments related to heart defects and those kind of things. So if you have somebody tell you that your child has dyslexia, well, that fits under a specific learning disability. And is it reading? Is it math? Is it combined? What is it? And so autism is on here. So that's a really frequent one. But you can also get a medical diagnosis of autism, but you still need to have a school follow up and do an evaluation to determine educationally, does it fit the diagnostic category? So schools are a little bit more limited in the type of disabilities they can serve, and they have to all fit under these categories. And that can be kind of frustrating, especially when the medical, Melissa, I think of how you guys might engage with medical professionals. They don't always know this. I did some talking to each of the hospitals' pediatric rounds. This was new to them, the fact that they could give a medical diagnosis and the schools would say, well, we still have to evaluate, we still have to look at this, because they weren't understanding that IDA has this separate kind of requirement for schools to specifically look at these categories in front of you. So when schools, and this is, if you go to the, you can Google eligibility determination guide South Dakota, and that their latest guide will come up. It comes up pretty high in the search. And in under each of those categories that was on the previous slide, it tells you exactly what schools need to look at. And you may be familiar with this, like if you've done learning disability, if you looked at learning disabilities at your child's IEP meetings, you'll see they'll say, okay, do they have this? Do they have that? And they literally have to check it off. Or autism, Joanne, you might have remember going through where they said for autism, you have to have 2 of this in number 1 and 1 of this in number 2, and you have to have all of them in number 3. And those are specific diagnostic categories that have requirements that schools have to check their bases before they say, yes, it's a cognitive disability, yes, it's autism, yes, it's a learning disability. So it's pretty prescribed as to what it is from an eligibility standpoint. Okay, you want to keep going?
Yep. So when you look at determining eligibility, we do have a multidisciplinary team that determines the need for special education services. It's important questions that will need to be answered that are included are, does a child meet that criteria for one of the 13 disability categories? Does a child disability impact learning? And does a child require special education and possible related services? And some questions or things that I was writing down their thoughts was, does a disability impact academic, behavioral, functional, or developmental performance? And then does a student need specially designed instruction, not just accommodations? So when you look at like ADHD or even autism, is special education or specialized instruction needed, or are accommodations enough or appropriate for that student or the disability?
Yeah, and that might make the difference as to whether or not an IEP is written or a 504 plan is written, because special education is really meant to be that specialized instruction. And then the multidisciplinary team, the other thing that sometimes parents will get frustrated about is, well, if my doctor says they have autism, why does the district have to reevaluate? Well, IDEA says very explicitly that schools have to use a multidisciplinary team. That's more than one person. So a doctor in an office is one person. A dyslexia professional out in their private practice, that's one person. So while districts can look at that information and consider that information, in order to actually determine eligibility, it has to be that multidisciplinary team. So, you look at what are the areas of concern. If communication is an area of concern, then a speech clinician would need to be on that evaluation. If we're looking at ability, you'd have to have a school psychologist on that. You need a special educator, you need a regular educator. So there's specifics as to who makes up that disciplinary team, and they all have to do their part to bring forward that collective information now to answer these 3 questions. Does a child have one of those 13 disabilities? Does it impact learning? And then do they then need special education, or do they need a 504 plan? What is it they need to help them access an education? Because that's what it's really all about, is how do they access learning and an education in a public school setting, right?
And this is just a good visual for special education services. in the top circle part, and then each leg is the three prongs. And the first one, there's the student has a qualifying disability, and that one of 13, and identifies having that disability from that team that has identified it. And then that middle prong right there is that educational impact. And it's that team that decides if that educational impact is there. And then that last prong right there, that special education related service. The student needs specially designed instruction.
Yeah. And the three-legged stool is a good visual because the stool can't stand without all three legs, right? So if there's one of those missing, then they're not going to qualify for special education. So it's kind of a good visual to remember we need to have all three of those.
Yep. Then who is on the IEP team? And these are just some good examples of who's on the IEP team. But in our conversation earlier too, this was a good one. But one example of why it's important for a classroom teacher to be on the IEP team, but just gives insight on grade level standards or what's going on in the classroom and why extra support may be needed or special instruction may be needed, and maybe why standards aren't being met. And just giving insight on what that grade level, what those grade level standards are. And maybe if you know that your child struggles in math or reading and they're in that middle school, high school level, having that math or reading teacher on the IEP team is important so that they can give insight in what your child is struggling in, giving insight on what they maybe or their strengths are too, but having those teachers that can see the weaknesses or give insight on what they might need support in is essential too.
Yep. Okay.
And then what is to be considered when writing the IEP? So based on the information gathered on the people on that, the team, make sure we are recognizing the child's strengths and needs. Make sure as a parent you come in with observations and some examples that I've written down. If you know that homework is a struggle and they're coming home and they're melting down and they can't keep up with their homework, bringing that to their IEP team and just saying, hey, we're struggling with homework. We can't keep up. We need help. Executive functioning skills. We can't bring pencils to class. Like we can't manage to even bring our Chromebook to class. Like we need help. I remember my son, who was a sixth grade, like it was a struggle to have a pencil and get his Chromebook. Like those were like we couldn't even get his Chromebook and pencil to class. What are we going to do to get him those two basic things so that he could participate in class? And if we didn't have those two things, we couldn't even do the rest of the 50-minute class period. So just bringing some of those concerns and trying to find supports and work through some of those problems as the team is together are important as a parent. And then just working through some of those evaluation results from assessments and observations and updated information on progress from teachers and the team members that are working with your child. And then talking about academic, developmental, and functional needs for your child.
And Joanne, that's why we always ask, do they, or recommend that you get those evaluations ahead of time so you can look them over, so you can come prepared to give your feedback. Because otherwise you kind of feel put on the spot and now you're supposed to come up with it and you get home and there's 1,000 things you wish you would have said that you forget. So I always tell parents, write it down and bring it. And it's okay to say, when they say, okay, are we good to go? To say, wait a minute, let me check my list because I had some questions. And did all your questions actually get answered about the evaluations, about what they're sending home? Did you see your thoughts and your opinions about what they gathered? Does it reflect what you see of your kiddo? And if not, add that and say, well, like Katie will say, he's doing great and great in the classroom. Well, that's because he comes home, Melissa, every night and it's a fight, right? Because he kind of holds it together all the time. So they're not seeing the true struggle if he holds it together all day long, but at home is a battleground to get him to sit down and read and do what he needs to do. So it's really important. And if parents don't speak up, a lot of times schools will say parent agreed. parent agreed, because they have to put something there. They can't leave it blank. A parent agreed, right? Because they don't know if parents don't say. So find ways to take your observations, your insights, your concerns, your questions with you so that in the moment you don't feel stressed and then those things don't get communicated as well as if you come kind of prepared.
Mhm. I took that one out.
Oh, did you? Okay, we can move
Yep.
on.
Yep. And then I think we talked about this one too, just um, the IEP needs to be reviewed at least once a year. And then if concerns arise, you or anyone else on the team can request to meet sooner. And then a student at IEP needs to be reevaluated at least every 3 years to redetermine eligibility. And I liked to the saying too that like IEP can be a guesstimate sometimes, that we may not get it right the first time. So not to be afraid or not to be concerned to advocate, to say, hey, this isn't quite right. We might need to change just or tweak it just a little bit. Or even that first, I think some of our feelings on IEP meetings, that it's okay if we don't get it right the first time. Just go and know that we're probably going to have a couple meetings and discussions about what we're going to need to do for our child to get it right. Um,
Yep.
and then that a student can be evaluated. And Joanne, I think you were a perfect example too, that like say something so that they can be evaluated again because there was a need that arose.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
And then we
Alrighty.
always say just to put your requests in writing, whether
Yeah.
it's being evaluated for the first time or reevaluated. Put
Mhm.
it in an email.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. That's good. Okay.
Yeah. So with some of these, what parents should know when you go to our website, and I don't know if Carla wants to just go to our website, if that's too difficult.
Well,
Um,
let's go through this and then I'll bring it up
okay,
because I don't want to stop sharing. So
okay,
talk about them first and then I'll find them on our website for us.
yeah. So this is our what parents should know. It's our SPED guide that Carla had talked about earlier, and this just gives a bunch of plentiful information about special education in South Dakota with all the special education laws that you can follow. And it's all online and you can download it. And it's just a super helpful, it's a book, it's a big, thick book, but super helpful to walk through. Um, and it's on our website again.
Mhm.
And then that's the first, like you can kind of see the first, there's two bullets, but it really should just be one. And then when you see qualifying for an IEP, a parent's guide to understanding the special education evaluation process, that's a video. And then there's a link underneath it. That's on our website too. And if you type in IEP on our website, there's a bunch of videos. There's a series of videos on IEPs. And it's different staff members at South Dakota Parent Connection that have done videos and training on IEPs. And they're just a wealth of information on different information on the IEP process. So you do have to register to go to watch them, but it's a super short registration process, and it helps us with our funding for that. So just another, like, for anyone, if you hear anyone who's going through the evaluation process, if they want to go to our website and watch those, they're super helpful. And then another thing, this is a website that I love to use when working with parents and going through IEPs. It's called Our Day in Our Shoes, and that's the website right there underneath it. But it has a ton of accommodations. So Joanne, as you look at you're doing an IEP for your daughter, has a ton of accommodations. If you type in ADHD accommodations, like executive functioning accommodations, ADHD accommodations, you can just kind of look at skills that she's lacking in, and just really good ideas for SPED teachers and for yourself to bring in. And even has ideas of like working on ideas at home, and just a wealth of knowledge on that website. And just kind of like normalizing all of the IEP process and kids with ADHD, autism, any disability that you can think of. But awesome awesome information on that website.
All right, I'm gonna go past some of these because okay, let me stop sharing there then. And whoops, I'll bring up our website real quick.
And the one thing we're gonna have to figure out how to get the QR code or the link.
Yeah, I have it here.
Do you? Okay.
Uh-huh.
Thank you.
I capture. Okay, so let me share now. It's always a process. Okay, there it is. Okay, can you see our website?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so if you just type like right away, because I've done it a lot, but if you just start what parents should know, and hit on there, or if you just type there, about special education in South Dakota, but this is the guide that comes up. And this is free to you guys, so you can download this on your computer, or you can ask us for a hard copy and we'll gladly give it to you. I'm going to scroll through. This tells you about who we worked on with it. But it goes through everything from the minute kids are evaluated all the way through to that whole transition piece. Joanne is in here, right? And then it does do, sorry for the scrolling. There's some definitions and acronyms so that you run into in special education a lot. But I wanted to go to the first chapter. So it tells you like what is the purpose of eligibility part B and state and local. So it tells you the book is set up so every chapter is titled, and then what does the federal regulations say? So this is what IDEA says, right? And then it goes on to say, what does that mean? And it's written in really easy, understandable language, because sometimes when you search those things online, you get the federal language and it's like, oh my gosh, let me take 3 hours to read this because I'm going to have to reread it again, right? And then just some hints. What should you know about that? What's just some hints for parents? And then a place for you to take notes. If you want to jot some notes about questions you have or how this, but so the whole book is divided up that way. And like I said, the chapters pretty much go through the whole sequence and it talks about discipline. I don't know, Melissa, you said, if your kiddo's struggling, and I don't know if you mean behaviorally or not, but so what is the responsibility of schools in regard to kids who are struggling behaviorally? We talk almost 100% of our calls now are about kids with behaviors. And schools have certain things they have to do, like the manifestation determination. If your child's been sent home from school, before that 10th day occurs, they have to have a meeting to say, are the behaviors related to their disability? And if so, we can't just keep sending them home. We got to come up with strategies and supports as to how we're going to help without doing that. And it does go into all kinds of due process, parent rights related to how you can file state complaints, and what's your right to have access to your kids' records. So it's a pretty nice comprehensive guide. And so you're welcome, like I said, to download that or to ask us for a copy if you'd like for that. And as Katie said, if you just type in IEP, you start getting all kinds of things about, for example, one of the things that becomes important to know is what's the difference between an accommodation and a modification, especially if they're going to move your kids from an IEP to a 504 plan, or say they need a 504 plan. There's a difference between accommodations and modifications. Teachers sometimes use those words synonymously and we get them really confused. So that's a little training that we have on that. We have this new video series that's starting. We have 6 videos and they just go through each part of the school year. Like the first one here is on IEP. What should those present levels of performance on that IEP? What should that really include, right? And session 2 is on, I can't remember what session 2 is on without opening it up, I guess. But each one is just a short video. Here's one on accommodations and modifications. Here's the one on services and supports. And so you can kind of go into it and look, you can either look at them in order, or if you're like, I need to know about extended school year, I'm gonna look at that one. Or I'm gonna look at how kids qualify, so when my child is evaluated. And then this exiting IEP services is really important because let's say your child is evaluated and they don't understand or they don't qualify. Well, that doesn't mean they can't get support, let's say through voc rehab. Having that medical diagnosis of, say, ADHD does qualify kids for support through other state programs like voc rehab. And so we always want to make sure that parents know that if their kids are taken off IEPs or they just didn't qualify, but yet we know they have a disability, they just didn't qualify for educational services, that they do qualify for other services, right? And so there's all kinds of resources on our um, website, and you just have to type in the topic of, if we type in transition, for example, well, that transition fair probably information is going to start showing up. Let's see if it was last year's. I don't know. Let's see what that one is. It'll be interesting to see. Well, this is what it's about, the transition to adulthood fair. And yep, September 6th, that's the new one. So that if you're interested in that, Joanne, there's information about that on there. Okay. So if you haven't been on our website, feel free to get in there and kind of look around and see what is on there that you might find of interest, okay? Okay. And then just some other things that we did want to share. This is the current IEP one that was in there. But you can see better on this one. Like video 1 is about the IEP process. Video 2 is about those special factors that they ask you about. Video 3 is about goals and objectives and accommodations and modifications. Number 4 is on understanding services and supports. 5 is on least restrictive environment. 6 is on extended school year. So they're just all broken out. And we've had a series before. And what we found was that it was overwhelming for parents to find time to watch an hour and a half webinar, right? So these are broken down into about 25, 30 minutes. So you can watch them when you have time. And you can come back to it and watch another one another time. So we heard from parents that would just, was making, they just didn't have the time, and we get that, how busy life is. So, but anyway, yeah. So that's what we have to share tonight, but we'd want to use a few more minutes, and then I'll